again for the people who are coming in new to this class, because the people who were already committed and in this class earlier were they gave me this huge giant stack, and you know, it was dire in a lot, because you know I have to do stuff like that, and so it takes a long time to get to the end. Okay. Oh, good. Okay. So from reading these, what do I think? I think they're coming along. I think that you're getting better at showing me and not telling me. I think your conclusions are terrible. I think a lot of your conclusions are, and yeah. If I was to, and you don't literally say and yeah, but it reads like and yeah. That's the last thing you're leaving these people with. It better be your best sentence of the entire thing. Your first and last should be extraordinarily strong, and I'm not seeing that. The best way, also the major mistake that everybody's making, it's either and yeah, or you bring in something that you completely didn't talk about at all in the rest of the essay. So you know how a lot of your conclusions are on this side? For many of the essays, I thought maybe the pages had gotten out of order and it was the conclusion to a different essay, but then I got to the end and I realized, nope, that was the conclusion to this essay, it just was terrible. So how do you make a better essay? Bookends. You know the things that you hold a shelf of books with? Literally, they're called bookends. So if in the beginning you talk about a sound that you heard, then the last paragraph should talk about some sound that you heard that you now have more insight into, that it matches up. Or if you in the first paragraph, you talk about immigrating to this country and going into a world that you didn't know that you had to find your way in, then your last paragraph should be about going to college as a new world that you won't know your way in, but because you did the first thing, the first immigration thing, you'll be really good at the second one, right? It's gotta link up. Third thing, you don't talk about learning English if you were born here, and you don't really speak a dialect now, because you'll get killed by the people who've been here for a year and a half, right? And also, when I read those and I see kids who are, I'm not saying that it's not difficult to come from my home, because I was born here and I come from my home because I speak English. I'm not saying that it's not difficult, but I'm also not going to say that that it's hard, because I know in comparison to people who got here 20 minutes ago, I have it easy. Like there are going to be people who do this thing, who immigrated, in 8th grade or in high school, and those are the people who should be writing those essays. If you're writing those essays where you were in ELD in elementary school, first of all, shame on you, and two, it's gonna fall really bad, right? Because if anything, you could maybe get away with it. Highly unlikely, especially UC. Highly unlikely you'll get away with anybody seeing that as being valid. But there's just a certain amount of, I think, honor in things. As Asian American people, as BIPOC people, as queer people, as marginalized people, that we have each other's backs. And we are authentic, and that we honor each other's struggle. We do not co-opt, steal, overinflate, or belittle other people's struggle, right? Because that's yucky and conduct unbecoming, right? So, like, we just don't do stuff like that. And for admissions committees, when we see that, we blackball the whole thing. And not only do we blackball the whole thing in private universities, if I'm talking to somebody from another school and they say to me, hey, did you read Wilson coming out of San Francisco Chinatown? And I'll say, yeah, and they'll ask, it's like, did you see that kid claimed something, such and such and such, and you like, hell yeah, and then we'll blackball that post. Why? Because we want to honor, and we want to give opportunity, and we want to build equity for those people who really don't have rights. So when we see another person of color, or we see somebody who's co-opting somebody else's experience, kids out of it. Remember I told you the story of the Native American girl who came and unseated the good one? We're looking for that. We're looking for the one that will unseat them. If you are claiming an authentic voice that you don't have, and it's pretty stinky because we can read it fairly easily, we'll kill them. Okay? So more often than not, this comes out of private schools than it comes out of public, because I think, one, public school students may not know about writing about being an English language learner, and two, they have the moral compass. They know not to do it, right? Okay, so that is my thought on that. My other thing that I read a lot in here was, a lot of you talked about being in AAA. Some of you have experience with it, with either having a grandparent or you yourself living in it. But there was just like a disconnect between them, right? It's like, my grandmother, I used to spend time with my grandmother in SRO, or I grew up in SRO, and then I do this thing with YSRO, and yeah, right? You need to bring it together. How are you better at your YSRO job given that you have this own personal experience? How are you better than this? Because this is a place where you can beat other students that have more privilege than you, right? Other students that have more privilege than you, like, pay a lot of money, or they go volunteer at their local community center, and they try their best, right? The fact that you're from this community and you're serving this community is more valuable than those other experiences, but only if you tell me about it. If you don't tell me that it brought you insight, or it made you better at your job, or given your experience you brought in something else, I can't count it, right? I can't measure it. But if you tell me, that puts you higher than it. Okay. What's my last thing? My last thing is, a lot of you say you speak Chinese. That's kind of not a thing. You have to put a dialect, Mandarin, Cantonese, Chinese, something, because they're different. And by the way, when you do that, it lends to authenticity. There are a lot of kids, particularly the white kids in San Francisco, that take Mandarin in their private schools, and they claim the ability to speak Chinese, and they don't have it. But if you say you speak Chinese and they speak Chinese and you don't detail it out, I can't see it, right? And I can only argue what's on the page. So unless you put it here, I can't argue it. What is my last thing? Oh, my last thing. Leadership is not something that you should be able to do ordinarily. In other words, leadership is not learning how to talk is not leadership. Learning how to talk to other people is not leadership. What else is not leadership? Being in a room with other people working on a project is not leadership. That's just existence. And so the problem is while that may be a huge step for you, and I honor the fact that that may be a huge step for you, when you get in competition, because all of this is a competition, right? And you're in competition with other people writing leadership essays, yours is going to tank, right? Because somebody is talking about, creating whole events, doing schedules and budgets, organizing large groups of people, deciding on a theme, developing that theme with a person, going and getting outside knowledge, working with other adults, working with stakeholders in the community, and then on the day of running from top to bottom in an event, and then writing insights into what they learned about that, and then talking about the next event that they're going to execute that's going to be larger and bigger. So if you write in your essay, I learned to talk to people as leadership, you're going to get killed by that other person. So it might just be you're in the wrong question, and you can put that somewhere else. But if you put that in your leadership essay, you're going to get killed. Hence, you're going to get killed. Now, what does being killed mean? So UCs, and where most of you want to go, is very unusual in that the top 3 UCs have acceptance rates under 20%. And it goes all the way to like 75% acceptance, right? So you're doing one application that goes to all of these schools. Davis is taking more than 50% of its applicants, right? But like, as you get to UCLA, UC Berkeley, UC San Diego, UC Santa Barbara, Irvine, right? The acceptance rates are far different in those schools. But you have one application. So you need to always be swinging for the fences, right? So an application, I mean, you could write about learning how to talk and your leadership essay, and that'll get you into Merced because, you know, it's not hard to get into Merced, right? And it's a 50-50 chance, or even better than that, of getting into Davis. So, you know, you may not, but if you want to get into those top three, then it has to be different. So, given that you know that, you can sort of decide how if you have no shot at the top three, then you can be done again. If you want to take a shot at the top three, then they got to go there. And it's unusual in that way, right? So that is my conclusion. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay, then I'm going to hand this back. If you're new in this class, raise your hand. Okay, there were supposed to be 3 of you, there are 5 of you. Why? What's the reason, starting over here, why were you not here from the beginning?
I was at church camp.
You were at church camp.
I didn't know there was an invite.
You gotta talk louder.
I didn't know about it.
Okay. I forgot to reply. Okay. I didn't reply. Okay. And that's...
I was in China.
You were in China. Are you the one that wrote me from China? Somebody wrote me from China. Is that not true?
I don't know.
Okay. How should I say this? You don't know me, and so, and the rest of you are sort of used to my level of honesty. Would you rather the sugar-coated nice way of it saying, or would you like to know the hot, honest truth?
Honest truth.
Honest truth. You guys, like, admissions is all about who shows up, who figures it out, who gets there, who gets the help, right? If you're going to go to UC, they're going to have five extra, like, internships. They're going to have 5 applications to be able to get extra money. They're going to have 5 opportunities to get the better internship out of, and they're going to be 2,000 people competing for it. If you don't show up, you can't ever get it. So whatever reason you were here, you are in effect asking me, because each one of you have to write 4 essays, right, for UCs. Some of you might want to apply to private schools. But if we're doing the UCs, there are 4 essays, and then each of those essays, you'll probably have 3 drafts of each. So you're asking me to work with you to, each one of you do 12 essays. There's 5 of you here, so really quick in the back, how much more work did you just give me? There are 4 essays each. This is a reduced lunch. You can thank Barack Obama because while he was president, he made all kids who qualify for free and reduced lunch. You can check that on your FAFSA, which is the national application for financial aid, and it automatically sets you up for money. So good for you if you are free and reduced lunch. There are people who are like, oh, I don't get the free and reduced lunch because it's gross. Of course it's gross. It's been gross since it was enacted when white kids were starving. By the way, it was only enacted, free and reduced lunch was only enacted during the Great Depression when poor white children were hungry. There were generations and generations of poor BIPOC children who went hungry in school and were never fed. But you can thank FDR who started feeding poor people, including, I mean, they could have guessed, I mean, it would have been within traditional bounds to just feed the white kids, but they actually fed everybody. So you can thank FDR for that. If you do get it, please apply for it, because part of it on your financial aid and things like that is you will show on your transcripts that you are on free and reduced lunch, and that's how you prove your low income, and it sets you up for things. So even though you don't take it, let's say you take a box lunch to school every day, still sign up for it and have the box checked because it puts you in line for financial aid. I want to really quickly go over a little bit more about that. If you have a single parent, congratulations. That's really going to help you on your financial aid. And however, and this is where it gets tricky, I am a single parent. I put 5 kids through private schools. I did not qualify for financial aid because of how much money I make, but all my kids managed to get partial funding for all of their things. So people say, oh, middle class people get screwed. I want to counter the idea of middle class people get screwed because I have been lower class, middle class, and upper class. Middle class people are not getting screwed because they're middle class. They go on vacations, they own cars, they own homes, they have assets, they're not eating at the food bank. They're not getting screwed. They have assets, they have more than really poor people. Poor people are not lucky to get financial aid. So if somebody says, oh, you're so lucky, no. You earned that and you are poor, so it's just equity, right? The more that we counter out these conversations and have counter arguments to them, the more equitable the system will be. If we continue this idea that rich people and middle class people get screwed over by colleges on financial aid and poor people are just lucky to get it, then we've bought into a whole idea that blames poor people for being poor and also does not see privilege where privilege exists. Okay, so, and I can hear, this may seem like a radical idea, it is not. Most financial aid, well, you don't go to financial aid unless you believe in financial aid, and most admissions officers believe this to be the same, to be true. And the best proof of this is immediately when COVID happened. We had an opening, right? And we got rid of a lot of things that caused inequity. We got rid of standardized tests, and we cut the FAFSA. It used to be like 133 questions. What, 20 now? So we took advantage of that and tried to make more equity within the system. The people who do financial aid, by the way, who determine financial aid, are all people who received financial aid. You don't have a lot of rich people as financial aid officers. You've never seen one. So, if you own a home and you live in a suburb and all of this stuff, there may be a narrative, and you're like, I deserve something. You fill out the form and you lay it at equity. If you call, and this is a classic Asian American parent thing to do. Asian American parents, particularly middle class parents, and even some upper class parents, will call financial aid offices and say, no, I'm really poor, I can't afford this. And then we just, quite frankly, pull up your FAFSA and we pull up everything linked to your social security number. The minute we see that you own multiple homes, or you make over $200,000 a year, or all kinds of stuff, right? That then makes us vehemently mad at you, right? You know why? Because I have the rest of Chinatown who I'm trying to fund out and I'm trying to get money to, and somebody's going to call me and demand money for which I would have to take from actual poor people in order to give you? Hell no. And I'm going to blackball that application. Because A, you don't deserve the money because you are not poor, and B, you just did kind of a shitty thing, right? And I'm always ashamed, by the way, because I work with a lot of different colleges, and all colleges have a list of like people who called and been terrible. And so if they call back and are terrible again, we look at the list first to see whether or not. We also take for everybody who calls in, we take notes and it's in a file. So if you call back, I will look into the file and all the notes for the previous person will be there. We don't look timely on it, and it'll screw you over. The better thing for you to do is work at it. I was a middle class kid. I was sort of a lower middle class kid by the time I got to college. My parents made, they had graduated from college by that point. They worked in public hospitals because they wanted to serve the communities we came through. So we made less money and we supported a lot of people. So it was like me, my grandmother, my grandfather, my aunt, my uncle, their 3 kids, my other aunt and her 2 kids, my mom, my dad, me, and my brother was all supported by 2 incomes, which are my parents, right? So, but I didn't qualify for full financial aid because I shouldn't. We owned a home, and my parents both went to college. So I figured out my financial aid not by getting a full ride per need. I figured out my financial aid by doing like, instead of getting, $50,000 in one thing from the school, I got 4 scholarships that were independent based on my community service, based on my leadership, and based on a talent that then paid for my school. That were need blind, so I was competitive. And by the way, maybe more competitive in those other ones because those other ones generally had very rich people applying to them. And so in that category, I was then the poorest kid there, which then made me more, because we had to put how much we owed and how much our families owed. And so had greater need. So while I didn't have need when you're looking at poverty, I did have need, greatest amount of need when you look at it in terms of merit. So if you're trying to bridge the gap, that's how you do it. Okay, what are things, so if your parents own a home, if your family collectively makes more than $150,000, if your parents own more than one home, if you have, I want to go back to single parents. Okay, as a single parent, you have to have your other parent, your non-custodial parent, fill out the FAFSA as well. Unless you haven't seen that person for 7 years or you don't know where that person is. But if that person pays child support or that person gives money or you live in an apartment that has that person's name on it or you know where that person is, then that person also has to fill out a FAFSA form. Okay, some parents try to hide the other parent. Try to say, oh, we don't know where they are when they know where they are. You will be asked to fill out the FAFSA, in which you have to put in all your expenses, and then you have to put in all the amount you get paid. If the amount you get paid does not match your expenses, and you don't have huge credit card debt, then we know you're lying, right? So somewhere you're getting extra money. So yes, sometimes people try and hide another parent, but if that parent gives you $300 a month for you, and you don't report it, but yet your expenses like your rent and your food and your phones and your health insurance and all this other stuff doesn't equal it, you get blackballed. Okay, so then people are like, well, how will we get financial aid? The people who most try to hide money are the ones that are least probably have to do it, right? Other people also, those of you who are, I met some of you last year, your financial aid is always based on the year before. So if your parents did something weird on your thing, I don't care if you claim all your tips or you claim all your cash or how you do it. You just have on your tax return has to equal your expenses. So in other words, if you put down your expenses as being, I don't know, $5,000 a month, but you claimed on your tax return that you make $1,000 a month, it's going to blackball and you're going to lose more money. Also, if your expenses are only $5,000 a month, you don't have to lie. That's really low, and you qualify for full financial aid anyway. By trying to run a scam, you will lose the money that would have been greater than what you would have paid. Does this make sense? Some people are like, oh, but I want a bigger tax return. Yeah, okay, so you'll get $3,000 more back if you do that, but you'll lose $45,000 worth of financial aid. It's not worth it, right? It's just plain not worth it. Okay, so does anybody have any questions? Because I'm going to move on. Does anybody have any huge fears? No? Usually people have huge fears after I say these things. Okay, you don't have huge fears. If you do have huge fears and you don't want to raise your hand, you can come to me afterwards. You can explain to me what it is, and I can figure it out. Oh, I always get asked, what if I haven't seen my whatever parent is missing and I don't know how to get hold of them? Oddly, terrific. That's great. We just have to prove it, right? So it's very easy to prove it. You get a third party. It's usually me, and I will talk to your parent, and then you have to prove that you got no money from them or support, or you're not in their apartment or something like that. And then I write the letter, and then you're free from having to find that person, right? Because some people don't even know who one parent is, right? And so we're able to remedy it that way. Okay, If a parent died, you need a death certificate. And it can be from any country, it doesn't matter which country. But you need a death certificate, you need proof that person died. Okay. Some of these things might take a while for your parent to find, like they may not know where your death certificate of somebody who died a decade ago, so start now and ask them where it is. Okay. So, what else I gotta look at? Okay. Okay, last class we went over how you figure out what to write on your, oh, by the way, of the 5 who are in here, are any of you applying to private schools? Or planning to apply to private schools? No? Okay, so they're about half the rest of this class is applying to private schools, so I'm going to review it anyway, so you're just going to hang on. Okay. Oh, by the way, I was very impressed by those of you who showed up at the Oakland Museum. That was stunning. I did not expect that at all, and I'm glad that you were there. It takes a certain amount of bravery to do that, and yeah, make sure you write about it in your essays, because that's wildly interesting to me. And also, those of you who hadn't met them before, you got to meet Encore, who's a lovely person. Okay, so this is Vassar College, where Encore and I both went to college. So I'm going to just use it as an example. So you can tell what's important. We have a brand new gigantic building with a farm-to-table restaurant, and so there's that. Academics do, this is student scientists make the most of a research trip to Iceland. So people always wonder, like, what's the difference between a university and a college? A college does not have graduate students, which is nice because you don't have to compete with them. And all of your teachers are full professors. You don't have any graduate students as your professors. And when I went to Vassar, I never had a class of over 45 people. And as I told you in the end, some of my classes in my senior year were like, I didn't have a class over 9 people, and my smallest class was 3. So in terms of competing for letters of recommendations for internships or for jobs or for graduate school, it's very easy to get letters of recommendation from a full professor, and a famous one at that, if you're one of 3 people versus if you're one of, UC classes tend to be in the hundreds, and then you have teaching assistants who run your sections, and those sections are usually 50 people, and the people who run the sections are not full PhD professors, so they can't really write for you for things. So think about it. So this research trip to Iceland, it's just a class. In other words, you don't have to compete to be in it or whatever. It's like there's certain classes that have research going on in them, and you enroll in them and you get to go. Your financial aid will pay for whatever percentage it is. So if you have 100% financial aid, it'll pay for 100% of your trip to Iceland, including all of your equipment, all of your transportation, all of your housing, all of your food, all of your visas, all of your materials, and everything that all those backpacks and stuff gets paid for by the university. You don't have to apply for an additional grant. It just comes because you get it. So whatever it is. So I went to Florence for 2 weeks for $37 because that's how my aid covered all the $37. So you should think about that because that's sort of an ad thing. Ellen Galinsky. So this is an alum. So there are always like famous alums, which she's kind of famous because she is a child development person, and she's obviously very old. She graduated from Vassar in 1964. She's in her late. But Galinsky theory was interesting because previously people just thought kids didn't really have an inner life. Like you're like a blob that ran around and ate things. Galinsky said that children actually have inner moral and ethics. They have the ability to discern. They have the ability to have insight, which grossly changed how we looked at children. The other place where Galinsky is often quoted is in sociopathy, because she also believed that there is a sociopathy scale and that children can be sociopathic. So Galinsky theory is sometimes noted when you have like a child shooter or a kid that stabs their sibling or a certain amount of sociopathy. Galinsky theory lends, because it used to be that all children are innocent and children could do no wrong, and she's actually said no, there are children on the sociopathy scale and they don't have the ability to discern right from wrong, and that children can be dangerous. I don't know. Do you feel like children can be dangerous? Okay, because everybody, I mean, you're younger, so you've probably seen dangerous kids, right? If sociopathy is a scale, okay, who wants to decide transgression of knowledge that has nothing to do with college but is really interesting and kind of cool about sociopathy in children? Okay, we're going to sociopathy in children. Okay, so Ted Bundy, one of the most famous serial killers of all time. By the way, one of my odd, I'm about to reveal something really weird about myself. One of my odd hobbies is I like to study serial killers. One of the most famous serial killers ever was Ted Bundy, right? You may or may not know him. He's thought to have killed like 12 people, but in reality they think he killed probably around 45 women. He was a law student. He was highly liked. He had a girlfriend who had a child, who was a single mom who he adored and was incredibly kind to. He held down a job. He was incredibly good looking, charming, like so charming. But he tricked women into getting in his car and beheaded them. And had sex with their corpses and was not really gentlemanly type behavior. He kept parts of their bodies, and no one really knows why. But here's an interesting thing. So they get him, they catch him, they put him in custody. And there was 3 psychologists, one woman, which is really unusual for the period of time this is happening. One woman in the 70s gets to interview him. And she's trying to figure out, everybody's trying to figure out why he did it. She wants to figure out how he did it. Because if she can figure out how he did it, she can figure out ways to recognize sociopathic people and serial killers in the future, which would be helpful, right? Okay. So she interviews him, and she's trying to, and by the way, you can, all of this on tape, you can listen to these tapes, her talking and him talking. So she's on a college campus. She did this both at UC Berkeley and she replicated it in a university on the East Coast. I believe it was Boston College, not sure. She talks to Bundy. She says, how did you choose your victims? Was it what they were wearing? Was it, the way they talk? Is it they smiled at you? Is it, she's looking for all of these things. And he was like, no, it was none of those things. I could just tell. I guess maybe it was by the way they walked. She was like, weird. Because she started studying the victims. And there's an interesting thing about the victims. One, they all looked the same. They all had a certain look. And I hate to freak you out, there was women, young women in ages 14 to 35 who had a shoulder length or longer length brown and black hair. But it was no Asian women, it was all white women. They all looked identical to his girlfriend in real life. So he was murdering people that looked like his girlfriend. Anyway, that's a side thing. So he finds all the women, and she starts doing research on the women, and she discovers most of the women have been victims of violent sexual crime before. That's an odd thing. They've all been victims of violent sexual crimes before. But how could Bundy have known that? They never told him. He didn't know. And it's by the way they walk. So she is a scientist. So she then goes and she films people walking in the academic quad. Just people walking, people walking, people walking. And then she, as girls walk by, she pulls certain ones aside and she interviews them and she asks them questions. Among the things she asks is, are you a victim of a sexual assault? Or have you ever been a victim of a violent crime? That's the question she asks. And then she goes out and she finds men at the university. She just a random, ordinary swath of young men on a university campus. So basically, like that, random swath. And she gives them a test, and she determines where they are on the sociopathy scale. Sociopathy scales: do they have empathy? Do they have the ability to read emotions in others? Can they read someone's face? Do they know right and wrong? Will they cheat if they can't get away with? If they can get away with it? What is their relationship to others, their parents, their family, whatever? And she places them on a sociopathy scale. Okay. She then takes the young men and she puts them in a room. And she asks them to watch the video of people walking in the quad. Just watch the video of people walking in the quad. And all of the young men watch the women walking in the quad. Da-da-da-da-da. And then she asks them to, just randomly so they don't catch on, just random things. Which one do you think likes the color red? Which one do you think is a good student? Which one do you think has a boyfriend? Which one do you think has been a victim of a violent crime? Which one do you think is graduating this year? And she's only grading on the victim of violent crime. The young men who were highest on the sociopathy scale could very easily pick out the women just by walking who had been victims of violent crimes. Okay, so why is that? Why can people higher on a sociopathy scale pick out people who've already been victims? Right? That's a really crazy discovery she just made. And the answer is this. We're all animals, and we're all hunters. Right? Just like lions on a plain looking over a whole field of antelope. And we're going to watch the antelope move. And we're going to try and figure out which antelope we're going to eat. We're going to look for the antelope that has a weakness. Right? We're going to look for the antelope we can kill. So what Bundy and the young men that were higher on the sociopathy scale is they were lions. They are just more primally based. And that's how they're able to pick victims. So, transgression in general thing. By the way, this is college level learning. My mother used to teach this in her psychology course at UC Berkeley. My mom used to teach abnormal behavior at UC Berkeley to psychology students, and then as a psychologist, she was also a forensic and legal psychologist. You know when you watch those like shows and they bring the psychologists into the courtroom to do an assessment of the criminal's behavior? My mom did that for a while. So she used to teach this in her class. So her moral of the story is, women, figure out how not to be a victim. If you are been a victim of a violent crime or any other crime, you may have a tell to people who like the victim. But if you know that, here's the other thing. If the women knew, this woman continues with her studies. If you tell women, right, this is exactly what I told you, that there's a tell that you may not know about, that when you do something, men on a high sociopathy scale can recognize it. If you tell those women, they change their behavior and they're no longer recognizable. So the reason why I tell this to teenagers is because me, in theory, just telling you this changes your outcome in the world. You're in the college campus. And when you think about it, that 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime, it is my hope by telling you this that there's a tell. And it has to do more with primal stuff than anything else. Now, does this mean that if something happened to you, you are now going to get beheaded and murdered? No. It just means that you're different. So anyway, that is my transgression on sociopathy and children and people and this woman.
But you told the men. That means they can figure it out, right?
You know, it's funny, they can't.
Oh.
they can't. And also, by the way, they ran that thing on women. Sociopathic women have the same skill. It's not gender-based. Women can also identify other women who have been victims. But here's an added thing. Want to hear an added thing? Women who are sociopathic and can tell and are also victims make better predators. Okay, that makes sense, right? And there are not a lot of men who've been equally assaulted, so we don't know if they make better predators. But the men who have been assaulted or sexually assaulted as children and were already on the sociopathy scale are apex predators, right? Because they have a hyper ability to recognize. Because for them, it's, you know how you see somebody who's like you and it really resonates with you? For apex predator people, by the way, I want to be careful about apex predator people, because in a Republican sense, that's just black people, right? That's not how it is, right? If we're looking at people who have been measured on a sociopathy scale and have committed these acts, then the same feeling we get when somebody resonates with something like I don't know, the two of you resonate with one another because you've been best friends and you see each other and one another. They will get that same level of feeling when personally victimized. So it's pretty hard to keep somebody from doing that because you naturally do. Okay. Oh, the other person who was really good at this was Jeffrey Dahmer. And Jeffrey Dahmer's victims were all young men of color, black and Asian. He had a type. But they were black and, why do you think they were all black and Asian? Jeffrey Dahmer's victims. They did all this stuff about whether or not it's a hate crime. Ever a guess?
Me?
No? And no other reason than a lot of people thought he was racist. He's not. It's just nobody looks for those people. Cops don't look for those people as much as they look for white people, and he knew that. So he just played into a racist system in order to get away with it longer. And he knew that. He had a really complex understanding of how not to get caught by using race, class, and gender. So refugee Asian boys from low-income families, the cops wouldn't look for them. Queer black men who were poor, cops are not going to look for them. So that's who we murdered. Okay. So we went totally off topic, but was it worth it? Maybe. I don't know. I will chalk it up to being worth it, so you now have a sense of what you learned in college. Okay, so I don't know what they're alums. This is Win Kid. Is a writer, producer, and promotional materials for HBO. Oh, okay. So Vassar is really big in the entertainment industry, so there's that. Okay, so why am I coming here? I want to talk what a liberal arts college is, because some of you asked me about that. Liberal arts colleges have nothing to do with the arts per se. Arts, because parents oftentimes, particularly immigrant parents, say, oh, you're not going to arts project, you'll never make any money, you will die. While it is the arts, by the way, and also if you do go in the arts, you will make money and you won't die. Okay? Here's my counter argument. Are any of you planning to study art in college? Okay. Here's my counter argument to you will not make any money and you'll die. Every single website, this thing I'm projecting here, every flyer, every Spotify music cover, album cover, every design of this and that thing, that logo on custom ink of the little octopus, right? That NASA sweatshirt. Oh, that's a really good shirt. That's Keith Haring. Tremendous queer artist, one of my favorite of all time. Like, what are the transformative vision of what we see as modern, right? It was made by an artist. There is actually a really high demand for art and design and people who can enable us to see things graphically, and it will be as it's been tracked and seen over the past, about 50 years, as we become a more global community, and meaning like we sell things in other countries. The demand is much higher, and other countries have many, many, many more artists and people who are in design, because it's not seen as something you'll never make money at, and so they just have more people in the thing. You ever notice how like Asia has so much design and graphics, and everybody's got a logo and a mascot, and everything has a cute little thing or whatever. One product will have multiple different visual elements. It's because artists surprise there. Canada in particular, in terms of music and things like that. Okay, so be careful when you hear that, but also know that it's not easy. Like it's a full pursuit. It's not just I'll go somewhere and draw. It's a you'll have to know your Keith Haring's versus your Basquiat's versus your Warhol versus your Schneebels in order to be, viable. Okay. You want to look at who's doing what. The best way to do that is to go and look at their events and what they're proud about. So what you'll see here is it was quoted in the New York Times story about why people I read this article on why people get emotional watching the Olympics. Somebody did a story titled Deadpool and Wolverine. Somebody got in a CNN story from a grief camp. Carlos Eduardo Espina, Casa 20, a one-man Telemundo for millions of Latinos in the United States and one of the White House's favorite social media personalities. You'll get to see who's important and what they value, right? So if you want to be the person that they take, look at who they're proud of, right? These are very specific types of people. So figure out how you make your profile on your application one that eventually turns into one of these blips on these things. Okay. Somebody asked me over the weekend, I can't find any classes. Oh, okay. Well, this is interesting. I used to study, I know this one. Vassar has a very famous, you've probably seen it in a lot of movies. They film a lot of movies on Vassar's campus, but this is our library. And at the end of the library is a giant stained glass window that's over 1 story high and wider than this is across, of the first woman to ever get a PhD. Pretty inspiring to study under that. So I used to take all when I used to work in admissions, I always used to hold my admissions like the first day of school underneath that because people would get inspired. Okay. I'm putting this up here as an image. Okay, those of you who are interested in studying art, why do you think that these images of these professors are being shown? Why these people? Are they not classically who you think of being college professors, right? Maybe the one on the lower left, the woman, but she's in a relaxed position with her knees up and she's got a book and she's super smiling. They're trying to convey a message here, right? Of closeness with your professors, of being able to know them and for them to be highly engaged in something that they're passionate about. Okay. Okay, so here I am. Again, a lot of people go through East Coast schools, departments. Oh, by the way, not everybody has majors and minors. That's sort of a later in the history of colleges thing. Other places have concentrations and correlates, and there's any number of different things. So some people go on websites and like, oh, I went to the website and they didn't have business, so I'm not going to go there. Business is something that came much later, and in East Coast schools and elite schools, it's generally called economics. Okay. I don't know. What are you interested in looking at? Since this is CCGC, I'm going here. Okay, this is Rocky. It's named after the Rockefellers, one of the giant families that founded the United States from the Gilded Age, and they made a ton of money. So I lived in Helen Rockefeller Strong's. Here's a weird thing if you have a lot of money and it was the Gilded Age. The Rockefellers went to Vassar. They didn't want to live in a dorm, so they built themselves a mansion, and they lived in the mansion, and then after they left, Vassar turned it into a dorm. So that's why my dorm room had a marble fireplace in it and like 10-foot ceilings and wooden beams in it and hardwood floors, because I was just living in a mansion. And then there was a creepy thing. There was another one, because later on the Carnegies come, and the Carnegies didn't want to be upstaged by the Rockefellers, so they built their own mansion, lived in it. But the Carnegies brought their southern cousins. So what do you think was in the Carnegies dorm that was not in the Rockefellers dorm? What would southern cousins bring with them to college? Who do you think was making their fried chicken? That's Shauna Cohen. Okay, so Shauna Cohen is famous because she was in one of my classes like this. She's white and poor. She is the head of Sesame Street International. She was given a $100 million grant to make educational or receiving stations in refugee camps across the world. And currently she's most famous, probably, well, it's not in her name, but she is a Jewish student, a Jewish person who is fighting for free Palestine and is working with refugee children coming out of Gaza as a Jewish person. So that's interesting. So this is really old, by the way, because she's 32 years old. So I don't know how old. Okay, so here you have this. Let's go and look at the course catalog for political science. The reason why I'm doing this is so you can know what college council, like when you write your essays, it's like why I want to study history. You can actually cite reasons why you want to study history. You should notice who the chair of the department and what that means. What do we know about a chair of the department named Samson Okoth Opondo? What can we assume about the head of this department?
They're not white.
They're not white. Neither is Stephen Rock. And if you look here too, these are a lot of names of color. So you know where Vassar is putting its money and who they are bringing in. Let's see. Okay. Here's a major. Here's what you have to take. Here's classes that you have to do for your. These are so when you say, "Oh, I want to go to Vassar and I'd like to take American politics," that's dumb. American politics is in every college, and that doesn't tell me anything about you. Where you want to be is over here, and then you kind of want to look at which one of these classes look interesting to you, and why would you want to take it, and what do you think you'd be able to tell me about it. So, who's doing who's doing environmental stuff? You. Okay, that's right. So maybe you, if you were applying to this college, you would look at things both in environmental science, but you would also look in environmental political thought, and then you go and read in here in the current origin context of eco-catastrophe. Oh, that's a scary new word. The high-stakes question of how to rethink the human and non-human arises together in relation with one another, entangled as they are, distinct as they might be. Many theorists from a myriad of disciplines and multidisciplinary areas have taken this question, some stressing the intrinsic value of the natural world, some proclaiming the end of nature, some critiquing the concept of nature with the capital N, as so all-encompassing that it inevitably allows human claims to mastery of the non-human. Though this course cannot exclusively survey all these approaches, we will explore some of the key contemporary debates regarding mass extinction, Gaia theories, off-sided Anthropocene, pertaining to deep ecology, social and political ecology, deep growth theory, object-oriented ontology, speculative realism, environmental justice, and post-humanism, ecofeminism, feminist, neo-materialism, and it's taught by Claire Sagan. So, if you were going to tell me that you were interested in environmental studies, and you were also looking at the intersection of like low-income areas and how it affects low-income people, I would 100% say that is the class that you should cite in your Vassar essay about why you want to go there. What's more interesting about this is they gave you the name of the professor, right? So you can then go back here. Wait, go back. Oh no, why didn't it go all the way back? Let's see. Handbook. How come I can't get back to the department? Okay, wait, hold on. I got a better idea. What was her name? Claire Sagan. So what you do then? Oh no, there it was. Where is faculty? Let's look for Claire Sagan. She'd be at the bottom. Oh my gosh. Okay, so Claire Sagan has been there since 2018. She's a 2-year Mellon postdoctoral fellowship at Brown and spending 1 year visiting associate professor at Florida International University. She received her PhD in political science along with a graduate certificate in advanced feminist studies from UMass Amherst. Her research and teaching focus on feminist and environmental political theory. She's finishing her first book called Beyond Utopia. In it, she urges that at various timescales in the quotidian and to the microeconomic and planetary deep time, capitalist temporalities, conceptions of experience of time, both are disconnected from ecological time and fetishize the ideal time that will never come, thus affecting our concrete past, presents, and futures in destructive ways. She calls this timescape chronia. Okay, if you don't understand a word that it's saying, great. Because that's why you ought to go to college there, so you learn how to do all those things. But if you are applying to this college, you say you want to take that class, you look up that book, and then you write about wanting to form a relationship with Claire Sagan and ask her what she thinks about how environmentalism it pertains to long-standing, historically immigrant urban communities, and how can we make it, because we're going to, by the way, Chinatown is going to be highly affected by climate change. You know why? As heat and temperatures rise astronomically, none of our housing units have the ability to cool effectively, and all of them contain older people. So if we don't figure out some sort of climate change responsive theory or policies, we're going to kill a bunch of old Chinese people. Not only that, the secondary thing is when it changes like how storms happen here. And if in your lifetime you've probably noticed we're getting bigger and bigger storms, and flooding in the change in Chinatown is pretty significant. So you might want to go and ask her that. You can also go and take her gender, science, and politics. So if you really like this woman, what I would then do is I would pull this whatever that is, and put that into the search engine and read that course description. So then when you write your essay on why Vassar, you can say, I'm really interested in the intersection of immigrant and refugee areas of the United States and environmentalism. I'm specifically looking at Vassar College because Dr. Sagan's work specifically in this. If I was given the opportunity to attend, I would love to take her environmental political theory class as well as gender, science, and politics, and bring my unique point of view as growing up within one of the most highly densely populated urban center in the United States, and where I studied and started my interest in environmental policy. That essay, all flying colors, because mine has, when I'm reading these essays, I have to answer for myself. If we give this kid 80, by the time you get there, $86,000 a year, does she know what she's getting into? Will she take every opportunity that I give her? Is she somebody who's intellectually interesting? And would I want that person as a roommate? Would I want that person in my club? By answering this question in the way that I just outlined to you and showing you how you go and find the information, that puts you on the top of that list. Okay, does anybody have any questions? No? Okay, for those of you who go to UC, you can also put this within your UC context, and you should probably put it into your academic interest thing. So to talk about UC's engagement of a certain idea, about like if you're interested in anything that has to do with Chinatown, you can talk about that the UC system has one of the largest and long-standing histories of Asian American studies of any system of higher education in the United States. If you want to talk about urban studies, the UC system has some of the largest amount of research capabilities within urban studies in the United States. The UC system has for a longer period of time than a lot of other systems and universities have had support for Asian American students, unlike any other systems in the United States. So put that in there. If there's a particular professor at a UC that you're interested, cite them. Why? Because it sets you apart. Okay, what time is it? You know what time it is? Perfect. Okay, I'm 7 minutes over. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or thoughts? Okay, so what did we go over? Other than how not to get murdered. Kind of helpful. We now know how to find classes. We now know how to find professors. We now know not to be afraid if you don't understand it. We now know how to structure it, beginning to end, of how and why you want to go someplace. We went over all the pitfalls that I saw in today's essays. And, oh, stop writing in the past tense. If you're still in AAA, if you write in the past tense, it reads like it's over and you're not going to do it anymore. So if you're on cabinet and you're going to do something next, like in a month, then don't say when I was in AAA, because then I think you quit. Right? So it also, by the way, it takes me a lot of time to go back and finish it up. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Want to know other ways not to get murdered? Here's the time. If you want to